And if you are with us still and you watch section 1, thank you very much. Welcome to part 2 with Tom Kersting. And he is sharing with us today on the topic of technology's effect on social, emotional, and family growth. Tom, welcome back, and you have the floor.
All right, thanks. So I'll start off talking about something that I call gamer kids. All right, so if you're a parent listening right now and you have a video game playing son or daughter, most likely a son more so, but not that girls don't play, but boys more so. The question that used to be asked of me is, do I think that video games are addictive? And I always said, yes, they are. All right, because when you look at the reaction to a kid, no matter how old they are, when the parents take away the Xbox, it looks like the same reaction you'd see from a methamphetamine addict having their methamphetamine being taken away. So about 2 years ago, the World Health Organization now officially recognizes gaming disorder as a classifiable, diagnosable condition. So it is an addiction. And the American Psychological Association, the organization that puts out something called the DSM Guide, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for therapists and psychologists like myself. That's where we get all of our coding and diagnostic criteria from, and they revise it every 3-4 years. So they've had on their docket screen addictive disorder, okay? And it has not made its way into the DSM Guide, and I believe the reason being is because the tech industry has strong-armed them into not allowing that to get into the DSM Guide, because if that ever did get into the DSM Guide, I can make an argument right now that upwards 50% or more of kids are screen addicts right now. And if all of a sudden that was in the DSM Guide and a child got a diagnosis as screen addiction, that means that no matter how much the school wants or mandates kids use, their one-to-one learning tools known as computers or tablets, all of a sudden if 50% of your kids weren't allowed to use them, what are schools going to do? How are they going to figure that out? And that's something nobody's talked about. But anyway, getting back to the gaming. So it is definitely addictive. I'll share a quick story. A couple years ago, a parent calls me up and says, "Yeah, can I please have my son come in and see you at your private practice? He's totally addicted to his Xbox." And I said, "Sure, let's see what we could do." So parents bring the kid in. Kid hasn't been to school in a year. Child Protective Services is all over their tail because they can't get him to get off his Xbox. So I knew right then and there what the solution was, and everybody listening right now knows what the solution is. Take the darn Xbox out of the kid's room, toss it into the trash, maybe go get the sledgehammer out of the garage and take care of business. But the truth is that's easier said than done, because any parent listening right now knows that if you tried to take your child's cell phone or their gaming device away, that child is going to go ballistic. All right, and that doesn't think about that. If your child's going to go ballistic by taking away, their video game system, what does that tell you? That tells you that there's an issue. I can see them being upset, but to go ballistic, when I say ballistic, I'll tell you some stories. So 15-year-old boy comes to my office, dad tells, and I realized at that point, I can't counsel this kid's addiction out of him once a week, that I had to really try to empower the parents more than anything. So I explained to the parents clearly, I said, the only solution here is you got to get rid of your son's Xbox. They couldn't get themselves to do it because they felt bad. They knew what his reaction was going to be. And I prepped them for it. I said, your son, when you take it away from him, which is the only solution, he's going to go crazy. So keep an eye on him and be prepared. So finally, after a few weeks, the dad texts me and says, I did it. I just couldn't take it anymore. I took away my son's Xbox. I feel so good. About 2-3 hours after that, I get a phone call from him, and he says, and he's really in a bad place today. And he says, my son went crazy, took out a knife, took out my $3,500 Fender guitar, and threatened to cut the guitar strings of my guitar if we didn't give him back the Xbox. That's an extreme example. Obviously, that's not the norm. Other examples I've dealt with are another one that just came to my mind as a kid. Parents took away the Xbox, and the kid went into the family room and just jumped up and down on the table in the family room and just crushed it to smithereens, things like that. More common, subtle ones are kids that play a lot of video games, and parents start to see the writing on the wall. The grades are falling behind. Every time they go down and tell them it's time to get off, they can't, because it's designed to be addictive. The gaming industry does that on purpose. And parents get fed up and they take it away. And, and what I have is a lot of examples is kids that are 12, 13, 14 years old that are the nicest boys you'll ever meet. They're the teacher's pet. Teachers love them, can't say anything bad about them. But what nobody knows is that that kid has half a dozen to a dozen holes in his bedroom wall from punching a hole in the wall one too many times after the gaming system has been taken away. So is gaming addictive? You better believe it is. No question about it. And so are the smartphones. Try taking the smartphone away from a teenager and their Snapchat and their Instagram and their TikTok and all that, and the outcome is going to be very similar to what I just shared. So that's one issue in terms of the social, emotional, and family component. Now, I would like to talk about something that I call parenting from a distance, and I talk all about this in the book. And what I mean by parenting from a distance is the following. Perfect example is 3 years ago, my wife and I and my kids went to Aruba during the February break. Out here in New Jersey, most of the schools closed for a week in February. It's cold and people are looking to go somewhere, and Aruba is a pretty hot spot. So we went there, and that was my first time there. We get to a restaurant. The first edition of this book had just come out. And we get to this huge restaurant, this Italian restaurant. I mean, just packed, 1,000 people probably. And the host starts walking us, to our seat, which is like all the way in the back. And as I'm, walking through this restaurant, it's all families. Every table is parents with kids. And what I was observing is that literally every single child in that restaurant, as I walked through, was on a device. And there was not really any interaction between the parent and the child. And it was just okay. It was the norm. And I was very troubled. And I remember when I sat down, I'm just like, I felt, I know I can't go up to people and say stuff, but I was like, had these images in my mind of like of having a box of books and just flipping them to table to these parents. And we sit down, and over to my left at about 1:00 is a family with their two boys. The husband and wife are sitting across from each other. The two boys are sitting across from each other. And both boys had a big set of those Beats headphones on and their own tablet. And I keep kind of looking over there, and my wife's kicking me under the table. And then I started wondering if those kids were actually the children of that couple. Because I'm sitting here for like 20 minutes already, and there's nothing. Like the parents don't even look over to them, and the kids are like this on their screens. And I'm like thinking to myself, they're sitting at the same table, but they're not. What's going on here? And then sure enough, their food comes out. And when the server puts the food in front of the boys, and they didn't even notice it. And it was at that point that I realized that it was their parents, because the parents, gestured to them, hey, your food just got there. And the kids came out of their hypnotic trance and started eating while looking at the screen. So and I share that for a reason, because it's not just at restaurants, it's also at the family dinner table in our country right now, where not many families have regular family meals together anymore. And it is just such critical communication time. It might not seem like it, but it is.
Yes.
Very, very critical. And that lends itself into another part about this parenting from a distance, even car rides. And I talk about this in the book as well. And this is based on my own observations. Next time you're driving, just take a look around. If there's a kid in the passenger seat of the car, if that kid isn't looking down at the phone, I will send you a free copy of my book, because you're not going to find one of them doing it.
I love it. I hope you do it.
Yeah,
I love it. I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So even, so all of that, even like, the dinner table, the 5-minute rides to and from school or sports practices and so forth, there's no communication between parent and child anymore.
Right.
It's been relinquished to the phone.
It's almost as though children are not allowed the luxury of a quiet thought. God forbid they have to muscle around with their own problems and try to find a solution without asking Alexa or Siri or ask a friend. I mean, even figure it out. That's one thing with my little training for homeschooling, is that don't necessarily feel like you need to give your child the answer to their question. Even if you know it, it can let you off the hook if you don't know it. But what good does it do if you give them the answer? Say, what do you think it is? How do you think you could find out? But in a non-electronic way, can we start with a dictionary and see what we find there? Yes. But I mean, I have a friend who was visiting with a little girl, and the mom said, "Oh, I just need to go next door. I'm going to get something. I'll be right back." And the daughter said, "What am I going to do while I'm waiting for her to come back?" And I said, "Are you kidding me? Really?
Yeah.
How sad. What I thought, doesn't that tell you a lot?
Yeah, I
Like,
know.
oh
I
my
know.
God, what am I going to do while I'm waiting for her to come back in about 2 minutes?
Well, it's funny. I'll share something that happened to me a few weeks ago. So I love golf. I play a lot of golf, right? So, friend of mine invited me to play at this really nice private golf club about over by where I live, and I know some guys in town that are members there and so forth. So after we golfed, we went out. We went on the patio, right? And then we had something to eat, and I didn't have my phone on. But when I got home, I saw a text message from a guy that I know from town. I haven't talked to him in a while. And the text is, "Hey, what are you doing at Hackensack?" And he's a member at Hackensack, this guy. And I'm like, "How the heck did he know I was here?" And I text him like, "How did you know I was there?" He texted me while I was there, but I didn't see it because I didn't have my phone on. And he's like, "Oh, I saw you." I'm like, "Well, why didn't you come over?" And he's like, "Oh, my daughter was with me." And his daughter's like 14 years old. And he's like, "I didn't want to just leave her by herself at the table." You know what I mean? Like, what? She's like, what?
Whoa, yeah, it's just amazing. I know I was a few years ago, my husband and I were in a T-bone accident, and I would swear the guy who hit us, right, just smack dab, was texting. No application of brakes, anything, just bam, 40 miles an hour, and kind of not too good. But I would swear that he was texting, and there's no really way to go back to the police report or whatever to find out at this point. But that it's just amazing, and there's just so many accidents that are caused by texting. Supposedly we have to wear our seatbelts and we can't be drinking or smoking a joint, but yet we can text. And how much more is it going to take before we can have
Mhm.
that not be, I mean, where you could maybe not even start the car if you have a device. I don't know, especially with kids driving. I certainly would make sure that they weren't able to have their phone with them so they could
Yeah.
text.
Well,
So,
real quick, while you're talking about that, a year ago I did a survey about a mile from where I live. There's a busy intersection, and I bought a small monocular, which is like a one-eye, binocular thing.
right?
And I parked in the CVS parking lot right when people come to a stop at the light. And I didn't realize it. Yeah, I could actually see what people are doing. You need this thing because I wanted to keep a tally and see how many people, when they got to the light, when the light turned red, had to look at their phones. Okay, and and then no, it was just over 50% of people, drivers in the car,
Right,
this
right,
moment they're at a stoplight, have to look at their phone. Now, I'll
right.
tell you another quick one. A few years ago, I was taking my son. It's probably 4 years ago, 3, 4 years ago. We were coming back from a camping trip with Boy Scouts, and I had two other kids that were friends of his in my car. Okay, and we're up on Route 23 in New Jersey, which is a four-lane. It's like 8 lanes, four on each side, kind of highway, but there's a lot of lights. So we pull up. I'm like the second car behind. Okay, so I'm in like the middle, and I said to the boys, I said, when the light turns green, okay, I will guarantee that one of those four cars doesn't go right away because somebody's on their phone. All right. So the light turns green. Three of the cars didn't go. So when the light turns green and all of a sudden you count 1, 2, 3, and then the horns start going.
Right, right.
Because not one, three of the people driving their cars, were looking at their phone and didn't
Of
realize the
course,
light turned red. Yeah.
of course.
And,
Yeah.
they, and my one son's friend was like, "Oh my God, Mr. Kersting, I can't believe you knew that."
You must be psychic, you
Yeah.
know? Like, how did you know that, Dad? Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. I have the more we talk about it, I have a good friend who's very much into this, and he said when I go to the grocery store, I he said I take a real book with me, a hardback, real big book, and so when I'm waiting to be checked out, everybody else is on their cell phones. I'm reading a real book. And he said, I like to think that I'm making some sort of a statement there, that people are going to think I'm really weird, definitely different, but he dares to read a real book. Like, what is that?
How dare you?
Yeah. How dare you like
You weirdo. You know?
Yeah, that's so amazing. But that's pretty interesting. And I know you were talking about the gamer kids. And when I was interviewing the founders of National Institute of Children for Safe Technology, they were telling me we're talking about ed tech, and they said a part of ed tech they have gamification. You're probably familiar with that term, where they teach children through games. That's how they teach them, through games, and it's kind of they didn't like that program at all because of how it was structured and everything. Yeah, talking about the gamification, pretty
Yeah,
interesting.
that's the game. What that is the gaming industry trying to weasel its way into the public schools.
There
So
you
they
go.
that's what it
Yes,
is. Yeah, they go in there and they
thank
throw
you,
free,
thank you. My
free things
mind
at
kind of
them.
spaced that.
Yeah, yeah, it's like free stuff. There's some. I don't know if you remember like the cola wars back in the '90s. The cola was like
Yes,
Pepsi and Coca-Cola fighting to get
yes,
positions in schools, and they would give different giveaways, and they give the schools free machines. They get kickbacks. Tech
right,
industry is doing the same thing right now with their school. Google. You have Google Classroom, and then you have I have it in a book. The other big tech using their platforms in the schools, and it's not because they're not really making much money doing that. Instead it's something called seeding, almost like grooming, so that once the kid getting these kids using those products early, so that now they become
right,
lifelong customers of that product. It's
right,
actually brilliant
right.
marketing and utilizing children in schools as the guinea pigs.
Right. That's amazing. I and thank you for finishing that, because we covered that as well. But I was watching another video with Tom DeWeese was on, and he said, talking about everything that we're doing with the Agenda 21 and everything. And he said, how do they manage to do this to our kids? He said, it's really easy. He said, essentially, they take a generation of children and roughly born between the years 2005 2015, and they've never seen a sky without white stripes. They've never seen a phone with a rotary dial, or even with a cord. Just these things that they're you just use them and they don't know any different. So they're not going to question like their parents or certainly their grandparents will do. You know, so
Yeah.
that's what I was wanting to ask you.
I was just looking out. I was just looking out the window and watching my son leave right now. And it's
Oh,
fun,
okay.
driving and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful is outside. Yay.
He's
So,
going to play. He's going to play football with his friends. I thought he already left, but
oh,
yeah,
that's great. That's great.
go to the park. Yeah.
Wonderful. So, it's good stuff. But
But real quick, I'll get back to the parenting stuff that we were talking
yes,
about from distance.
please.
So, with the car rides and the dinner tables and all that. Another thing that I talk about in the book and I have the citation to show it, is that the average parent nowadays spends just 3.5 minutes per week in meaningful conversation with their children.
How sad. Oh my goodness.
And it's not because it's not just the kid, yes, we know that our kids are spending 9 hours a day. So are adults. So the typical household in America doesn't really look like a household of previous generations. It's more like four individuals staring at a screen and not talking to each other. And that's what most households now look like.
And I so believe you. And that's one thing I had, if the kids are addicted, if their parents are addicted, how do we unpeel this hot mess of an onion? Do we maybe reach out to grandparents' generation, maybe in my generation, who we remember life without this technology? Even in our homeschool situation, we're using pencils and tablets. We're not using any. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I won't even know, no cell phones, nothing. But because I know what they're missing, and she's learning and remembering more, and she's not asking for anything different. She loves it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, what do you think? Do you ever talk with grandparents? I mean, ideally,
I
you have to empower the parents, but if they
well,
don't see the
yeah. What's interesting? So, my book, the book, it's reached tens of thousands of people, right? So I get emails from people all over the country regularly, and I never expected the amount of emails that I would get from grandparents and phone calls, because they see their children children, their grandkids, and they can't believe when they come over and all they want to do is be on the screens, watch TV, and so forth. And it's kind of a difficult situation because if they say something to their children, the parents of their grandchildren, there's hostility that often takes place, like a defensiveness, and they don't want to really make any waves with their own children by saying, look, you're really going to let Johnny just come over and just sit here and look at his iPad all day long, right? Because there's a defensiveness that often sets in with those parents. So really, the best thing, and I mean this, is people need to educate themselves. They need to understand, what is happening, not just to our brain, but our social, our family, everything else. That's why I wrote the book, and I'm grateful to have been able to help many, 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 many people actually make changes in their own households.
Yes, absolutely. I'm really grateful for you as well for what all you're doing there. And I do, like you've also talked about social conformity, that I
Yep.
think that kind of comes in there along with cognitive dissonance and all of those types of things. But
So I'll talk about the social conformity real quick. All right.
perfect. Yes.
So when I'm at a lecture, or when I used to lecture, I should say, in person. I was all over the country, and I love doing it.
Your audience checks out comatose, right?
Yeah, I know. So I'd be in front of hundreds of people, and I really love speaking. And I actually used to have panic attacks when I was younger, in my early 20s, major panic attacks. Like I could never have imagined getting up and speaking in front of people. But you get a little older, and you kind of just don't really care as much of what people think about you anymore. So anyway, I love doing that. And I ask the question when there's a crowd of parents, and I'll say, raise your hand if you think it is smart for an 11-year-old to have a smartphone. Okay. So out of the countless lectures I've done with thousands and thousands of people, there has never been one person that has raised their hand in a crowd. Never one parent has said, I think it's smart for an 11-year-old. All right. And then I, gently, without trying to, I don't want to really make anybody feel upset or anything, I'll say, all right, so we can all agree that it's a terrible idea for an 11-year-old to have a smartphone. Yeah. All right. And then I go on to say, well, the average age of first smartphone issuance is 10 and a half years old right now. So that means about 80% of you in this room that just agree that it's a terrible idea, your kids have smartphones that are under that age. So how do we explain that? We know it's a terrible idea. And same with rated M video games. I ask that same question. Oh, never, I don't, they're terrible. And yet most of the people in that room, 70%, that agree it's a bad idea for kids under the age of 18 to play rated M violent video games, their kids play them. So how do we explain this? We think it's a bad idea, but we do it anyway, right? It's called social conformity. And social conformity is essentially a form of peer pressure where we may have our minds made up as parents, like, all right, I'm doing this with my child. My kid is never going to be eating bad food or drinking soda and so forth. And we have all these things set in stone, and they're not getting a phone. And then as our kids get a little older, all of a sudden, when all of their friends get the Call of Duty game, or they all get their phones, we start to worry, like, is my kid going to be left out? Everybody else is doing it. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm overreacting. And boom, there we go. We do something that we didn't agree with, and we wind up conforming to what the norm is going on around us. And people might not want to hear that, but that's what the facts are.
Such a good point. I'm so glad you brought that up. I'm also seeing that with the masks, with the people where, and with the virtue signaling and the shaming and all of that. Oh my goodness.
Yep.
Just, trying to, but I don't mean to be veering off there, but it's kind of.
Oh, no, but it's true. Yeah. Mask shaming, right? They call it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I like not wearing my mask and seeing, what people have to say.
I know. I've done a little bit of working with Peggy Hall, who's really very active with the masks and everything. And I agree with her when she says that even when I can't stand to see the people in the mask because it hurts my soul. And I feel the same way. I'm a highly sensitive person. Don't know if you're familiar with that syndrome that affects about 11% of people, but literally where I can feel other people's emotions. And
Me too.
yeah, you too. I'm not surprised. Not
Absolutely.
surprised. Yeah, and even from a distance, you don't have to be physically with them, that you can pick up on that. But when I'm around, like I have to go to Lowe's or something and pick something up, one of my favorite places to go is Natural Grocers. It's everything's organic. I'm a vegetarian organic. And what I love to go to, I used to love to go to that store, but now when they're all wearing the masks and things, I try not to look at them. And I see out of the corner of my eye, I'll be without my mask from Patrick Wood's group, Citizens for Free Speech. I have one of his cards, the First Amendment. I have a medical exemption, and my exemption is that I'm healthy and I like to breathe. And masks impede the breathing. So that's my medical exemption. So I wear this card. My husband wears one too. And people know what that is. And they usually give us a wide berth. But I've seen people come around the corner of the aisle and they see, oh, there's somebody without a mask. And I see them flinch and they'll just hold back and just like pretend they're looking at something until they see that I've cleared that aisle, and then they'll come down. I said, "Are you kidding me?" Like,
Yeah, I know.
oh,
It's a sort of brainwashing. I mean, I get maybe the masks work a little bit, but I always said this from day one with the whole COVID thing. If you don't feel, I don't live in fear. I have no fears,
right, right,
not even death, because I know I believe in God. I'm going to heaven.
right.
And I live an honorable, good life. But you know, if you're afraid to go out, right, then stay home. Like the person then don't go out. You know,
Exactly.
like even Thanksgiving, my dad, is what, 75 years old, and he's not in the best of health. He's got like heart disease, and but so we're supposed to go to my mom's for Thanksgiving. So we're not going to go because I don't want, you know what I'm saying? Like I don't want to be responsible for anything happening to him. So we should be able to make our own decisions and our own choices.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely that's why I think if people want to wear a mask, wear a mask.
Mhm.
And yeah, yeah, absolutely. But it's just the fear. The fear is what is really upsetting me, and it's palpable. Being sensitive, can't you feel it when you're out among they're just.
Yeah, I
God.
get mad. I get that's how I feel it. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
get upset because people are just it's everywhere you go, and because I see through the nonsense. Like we still go to restaurants and stuff, and they have the outdoor seating. And there's this one restaurant up the road, and it's never really that busy. It's like you walk in, and there's nobody there, right? We're the first ones, but we have to wear a mask on when we walk in. And as soon as we sit down, we're good because COVID all of a sudden disappears when we're at our table.
isn't that absolutely ridiculous? It is
Yeah, and I actually met my friend for lunch last week, my buddy. We went to this Irish place called the Shannon Rose. And so I'm walking in, I got the mask on, and we're going over by the bar. We're gonna have lunch, and we're gonna have a couple of beers, right? And we sat at one of those high top tables, and it made it very clear. It's like you can't. Once your beverage comes out, you can take your mask off, but you're not allowed to take it off until your beverage comes out. And all I'm thinking of is, oh, I guess once my beer comes out, the aroma from the beer is going to kill any COVID in the air. It's just stupid.
It's the alcohol, you know. The alcohol kills the COVID. We went out with our homeschooler. We were doing a unit study on fossils and dinosaurs. There's a place near here called Dinosaur Ridge. We were walking up, and it was a great day. And so we decided to go to an outdoor place nearby. And it was the first time we've been out to eat in all year. Really, it was fabulous. And
Yeah.
we didn't do the masks. No one asked us to wear a mask to get to the table, and we didn't. And we sat out on the patio. It was great. Everyone else was kind of masked, including our waiter. But our homeschooler, our star student, and valedictorian and prom queen, we only have one student, but she was with us, and she had her first Shirley Temple. It was so cute. But she went, she kind of coughed. Bless her heart. She goes, "COVID."
Yeah, I know. I know.
Oh my God, it was perfect.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. So and then we got the Greta Thunberg going, "How dare you?" You
Like
know,
I know, Greta.
so it's pretty amazing. But so, Tom, I feel like I apologize. I'm probably leading you all over the place, and you have such great content. But I think it's all related, and hopefully our viewers can relate to and maybe learn some things too. And it's all good. So we've got, I think you've covered the parenting from a distance and the digital classroom, high tech impacts learning. I know I understand that that with um, the children learn better by writing than they do from an iPad. That's been proven, as I understand,
Yeah,
in actual
there's some.
studies.
I have a
Right.
couple of research studies that I reference in the book regarding that.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
one study done at West Point. Where they did an experiment with kids, same class and
Right.
teacher, just different. The teacher taught three different classes, and they had the kids were allowed to use their computers and so forth in one class. Others were allowed to use it just for homework. And then the other group didn't use any computers or anything. The group that didn't do any computer use and was all paper and pen did substantially better. So real quick, I wanted just one from this other section I want
Yeah.
to talk about that I missed is EQ versus IQ. All
Okay.
right.
Good. Yes.
All right. So, and this is important. So, anybody listening now, you know what an IQ is, your intelligence quotient, right? Intelligence quotient. So, your IQ is a numerical number, okay? And it's fixed. So, if you're born with an IQ of 120, your IQ is not going, it may be able to edge it up a little bit, but not much. You're not going to become you're not going to have a 140 IQ, no matter how many books you read. So, it's a fixed number. Now, your EQ, it stands for emotional quotient, hence emotional intelligence, is the ability to understand your emotions, the ability to regulate your emotions, the ability to empathize with the emotions of others, the ability to go on a job interview if you're a recent college graduate and just blow these people away, even though your GPAs and all that good. Your very presence and your ability to communicate. Now, EQ, having a high EQ is twice as important for life success as having a high IQ. And now your EQ is not something you're born with, however. The EQ, in order to develop a strong emotional quotient and emotional intelligence, requires a substantial amount of work, believe it or not. And the work that I'm referencing is face-to-face interaction with our fellow human beings. That is the way in which to develop a strong emotional intelligence, because that ability we're like almost like bats. We communicate, very energetically, very non-verbally, okay? Like you nodding your head right now as I'm talking and so forth. Today's generation of kids have had such little face-to-face communication with each other that when they go on that job interview outside of college, friends of mine that work in the city, I'm a half hour from New York City, and it's mostly everybody around here works in New York, and they work in finance and stuff, and they'll tell me like they get these recent college graduates and I'll ask them questions and I'll maybe throw a little joke out, and it's like a blankness, like this. And it's like, this person's going to sell stocks. So that's part of emotional intelligence as well. And I address that in the book because I really, really worry that our kids, because they're spending the majority of their waking hours on a different planet called cyberspace, how are they going to thrive in the real world, in our planet, if they're not living here, if they're hypnotized and their mind is somewhere else all day? And the answer is, there's a reason why we have an emotional health epidemic. There's a reason why the suicide rate has gone through the roof. There's a reason why many, many young folks can't get a job or hold a job because they don't have the skills. And the fundamental skill is interacting with other humans. Throw the masks on top of it, remove kids from school, de-individualize everybody, and now we got a real problem.
Exactly. And additional and man-made environmental influences like the geoengineering program, the chemicals, the GMOs in the foods were being dumbed down, the fluoride in the water. And again, with the calcifies the pineal gland, and it's just the storm. And I believe, I don't know if this would be a good time to mention this chart that I was sharing with you. We're gonna be sharing it on screen. So about the growth of disease since 1990, Richard Lear's chart, but it's just staggering the number of disease that have gone up so much. The leukemia, childhood cancer, blood cancer, 588%. Insomnia, 123%, thyroid, melanoma, obesity, 260%. So we'll be sharing this with the film too, but I don't know if you might want to speak to that. But 1990, what runs parallel with that time frame, 1990 to now? Like you say, the technology, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, another thing too, even like I could another statistic kind of correlating to that is the suicide statistic. So if you go back to the late 1990s, it wasn't that long ago, the number one cause of fatality among kids and teenagers has always been automobile accidents, and number two has always been death by suicide. So back in the late 1990s, there were four times as many deaths by automobile as there were by suicide. Four times as many, okay? And suicide was the number two cause of death for young folks. Fast forward to about 2 years ago, and that has changed. Now suicide is the number one form of fatality among that age group. And when you look at the statistics from between 2012 and today, and 2012 is really, believe it or not, when smartphones came on the scene, to the extent that we use them right now. And a lot of the information starting in 2012 to 2020 right now, when you look at the numbers there in mental health and in the death by suicide, it's like this. Yeah, because our kids are, they're absorbing all of this artificial stuff into their minds. And that leads me to another thing I'll talk about is also the fear, right? What I call hypnotized by fear. So when I remember when I was working at the high school, which I mentioned I had retired from in last January. So I'd leave here every morning, leave my house about 7 o'clock in the morning, and I'd get stuck behind buses and so forth, right? Some school buses. And what I started observing, and I noticed that most of the kids, the bus would come to the street, and there would be an SUV, and that kid would get out of the passenger seat and get on the bus. All right. And I'm talking teenagers, 13, 14, 15-year-olds. And every street in my town is a dead end, by the way. So that kid that is, isn't allowed to walk to the bus stop, even though it's like 1/8 of a mile away at the most. Right. So, and part of that is this fear of kidnapping, right? People think, what if there's a kid, like these kidnappers lurking in the bushes, right? What people don't know is that kidnapping is at an all-time historic low. But where do we get this mindset of all this kidnapping? Well, and it starts with our phones and the ability to consume so much media now. 10 years ago, if there was a kidnapping in the middle of Mississippi, you wouldn't know about it. Right. Like if you live out here in New Jersey or in Colorado, you'd never know. There would be no way of knowing. Now, every little thing that happens goes right to your phone like that. Boom. Any piece of news, kidnapping, this, that, whatever it is. Everybody in the whole country knows about it. So we're absorbing all of this fear stuff all day long, and we don't even know we're doing it.
Yep.
And and now you have, and a lot of people might not know this, depending on what you watch on TV, and you have the big tech industry controlling people's thoughts, and they don't even know what's happening. They're censoring information, important information that they don't want people to know about, that doesn't fit their agenda. So they censor it, and Twitter doesn't allow it to go out. Facebook doesn't allow it to go out. And then the mainstream media goes along for the ride with it. So they're pretty much pumping information into the brains of all of us right now based on what they want you to know and not know. And that is what's happening.
Nothing scary about that. Not at all.
It sounds very, very, very North Korea-like to me.
Right. And kind of looking into ingredients that supposedly is in the COVID vaccine, the nanotechnology, leading us into AI and all of that, and how long as soon as I start talking about that, people are going to say, I knew she was over the edge. That just confirms it,
Yeah, and you look at, talking about stress and anxiety. Everybody seems like they're stressed and anxious all the time. How can you not be if everybody's looking at their phones 9 hours a day? You're absorbing all of this stuff. I follow a lot of stuff. I have Facebook, and I love to follow people's behaviors, right? So the amount of hate, pure hate and anger that I observe, and these are from people that I knew and grew up with. I never respond because I don't want to get involved with politics.
Right.
But the amount of hate that has come out, right? And I'm just thinking, where is this coming from? Just vitriol, like every day, like some of these people, that's all they do. And then all of a sudden, Biden wins the election, right? And these same people are now out saying, now everybody can heal and so forth. And all I'm thinking to myself is, I don't care what people's political opinions are. All I'm thinking is, I don't need to heal from anything because I don't have any hate and anger in me. So I don't need to heal. So it's really these individuals I'm referring to. It's unbelievable.
Yep. And I also say, and no, we are not all in this together. I will not participate in this new normal. Nope.
Yeah. No, I know.
Nope.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, unbelievable. So that's the whole fear part, and it's
Yeah.
I mean, we're just getting this stuff transmitted to us all day long, and our vulnerable subconscious minds are just absorbing this stuff, and we don't even
Yes.
know it, and it's affecting our emotions and our levels of stress and so forth. Which
Yeah.
probably leads me to the next this final part of the book and the discussion, which is about what we could do.
Okay, so why don't we bring this segment to a close on that note, and then we will see everyone over in part two.